Words are about to be spoken here on the Extreme Life of Matt Hardy, presented to you exclusively by Podcast Feed and AdFreeShows.com. I, of course, am John Alba, joined as I am every single week by the woken one, the broken one, the spoken one himself, Mr. Matt Hardy. Matt Hardy, you are a fucking idiot.
Yes.
I just thought I had to put that out there.
No, yeah, that's a good intro. Thank you for the warm compliments right off the jump.
What's going on, brother?
Just hanging out here in Chicago, getting ready for a big live Dynamite, and then we have a big live Rampage this Friday, and then a big live pay-per-view on Sunday. It's a big week for all elite wrestling.
Yes, it certainly is a big week for AEW. It's a big week for all wrestling fans, man. Lots of people congregating on Chicago and Hoffman Estates and Schaumburg and everywhere around that area. I'm going to be there for Top Guy Weekend for AdFreeShows.com, and I'm going to be, as you heard, just last week, I'm going to be the sideline reporter for the Wrestling Showcase. I hope that I get to see you this coming weekend. Make sure you swing by if you have some free time. Swing by, say hi to the top guys. They'd love to see you. I'm excited for it, man. It's Chicago's such a great wrestling city, isn't it?
It's a great wrestling city. I mean, more times than not, I list Chicago as the number one city.
Number one
I'd ever worked in. Yeah, and I have. And the loudest crowd I have ever been in front of, and this is, I'm pretty certain that there's no crowd that has ever touched this, was a crowd in Chicago where myself and my brother Jeff, we were wrestling Road Dogg and X-Pac, and it was so loud. We were 3 feet away from one another and we couldn't hear each other. The crowd was so insanely loud on a live episode of Raw. They're amazing. When Chicago is on, they are the best crowd in all of space and time.
I believe we covered that in our archives, extremehardy.com. I think that was our our Royal Rumble 2000 episode. I'm pretty sure it was somewhere around there, because that was the episode where Jeff and Sean were yelling at each other, right? Wasn't Sean Waltman upset with Jeff about, or no, that was a house show.
Yeah, that was a house show against Sean Waltman and Glenn Jacobs.
That's right. But it did come up. It did come up. I'm pretty sure it's in our archives, extremehardy.com. Where you can also check out last week's episode on TLC 122 years. We took a really, really strong deep dive into that. What was your feedback that you got on that episode? It was pretty polarizing, it seems.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. And once again, the transformation that you see going on BTE, a little bit on AEW programming, obviously, but there is not only a transformation happening to me from a character standpoint. There's also a transformation going on in real life of Matt Hardy. I'm just definitely being a lot more open, a lot more blunt, because it's one of those things I accepted a long time ago that not everyone is going to like you. There are going to be people that dislike you regardless of what you do, and you can't win them over. So almost just fuck it. Just say what you believe and stick to your guns and be yourself. Not everybody in the world has to like what you say. I mean, if you feel strongly enough that you're right and you're correct in your stance and your standpoint, then go with it, man. You're doing yourself justice. And I felt like that's what I was doing last week.
And again, just to clarify, you were not calling people, quote, fucking idiots if they did not simply like Kenny Omega or the Young Bucks.
Correct.
You were speaking to not having an understanding or appreciation to their contributions and their ability. Am I correct in saying that?
You are correct in saying that. Once again, the first headline, which a lot of websites are going to put out, is clickbait to try and get viewers to their site. Was Matt Hardy says you are a fucking idiot if you don't like the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega. Well, let me put all this in context and fuck it. I don't know who's doing this, whether it's Wes, whoever's clipping this today, Wes, Josh, whoever it is. Look, what I would like to say is just, I'm going to go over it again. I'm going to reiterate it. The Young Bucks, Matt and Nick Jackson, these two young guys, and Kenny Omega, and I'm going to throw Cody in that mix too because he was part of it. These guys did this initial first show, and they got this movement started. They hooked up with Tony Khan, and they changed the course of the wrestling industry. And they unquestionably made it better. AEW makes the wrestling industry better. And I am not talking about the Young Bucks character. I'm not talking about Kenny Omega's character, but like the Cornette people who like try and clown on them. They said, oh my God, I wish they would break their neck, or I wish they would die. And, Kenny Omega's twinkle toes, or they keep referencing his past of what he's done in Japan. I mean, fuck it, guys. Everybody has some bad shit in their past or different shit. And it's not even like it's bad or wrong. It's just not your cup of tea. But like when it comes down to it, Kenny Omega is one of the greatest workers that has ever been in the ring. I mean, you can probably agree with that, right, John?
Ever.
No doubt about it. I mean, he is a fucking workhorse who fucking kicks ass, and the Young Bucks are too. And the Young Bucks are so low-key great, not only from what they do and how they do what they do, but also from a psychology standpoint. I can say that. These two guys, this tag team and Kenny Omega, are the reason AEW is in existence, that there is some sort of competition, that there is a rival to WWE World Wrestling Entertainment because of the Young Bucks and because of Kenny Omega. Professional wrestling is no longer a monopoly. There is another place for the boys to go work. There is another product for the fans to watch if they don't like what they're seeing at WWE. And once AEW came around, WWE stepped up their game. There's no question about it. And now the changes they've went through with Vince not being there, it's made them step up their game even more. And for wrestling fans, it's a win. And for wrestlers, it's a win. Anyone who enjoys professional wrestling, and if you truly love professional wrestling and you can't appreciate and like the fact that the Young Bucks, Matt Massey, Nick Massey, and Kenny Omega, Tyson, if you can't appreciate and like those guys for their contributions to pro wrestling, then you are a fucking idiot. And that is everything in context right there. And actually, I'm going to throw Tony Khan in that as well. If you don't appreciate and have a respect and like Tony Khan, you're a fucking idiot, because he made the wrestling industry better. He put some sort of competition. It's no longer a monopoly.
That was a Tony Khan press conference rant you just went on right there.
My mind wasn't as passionate, though.
I've seen Tony Khan get very passionate.
Tony Khan is one of the most passionate people I've ever met. He's not just passionate about the people he employs as pro wrestlers, and he's not just passionate about his pro wrestling product. He's also passionate about the human beings that work for him, about the human beings that perform as these larger-than-life characters. He actually gives a shit about them, which is great to see. It is super refreshing in pro wrestling in 2022.
Well, it's going to be an exciting weekend there for AEW All Out Weekend. We also made some headlines. I knew we would with the Vince McMahon story. It's one that has gone around the internet just a little bit that you told last week about your interactions with him at SummerSlam. And if I'm not mistaken, after the episode aired, you got a text from a significant name in WWE who will not be revealed, but they corroborated what you said. Yes,
I had got a text from another WWE star that is a very top guy, major star, and he did. He said that he got that same talk from Vince McMahon to be motivated. And he put a little twist on it. Vince softened it up at the end, apparently. But he did. He gave him the exact same talk. And my response back was, LOL, he's a madman.
Eating people in wheelchairs.
You want to fucking eat them. You want to eat them. Eat them. Eat them.
And it's funny because
inspiration behind Broken Matt Hardy.
There you go. It's funny because the other headline about the Bucks was taken out of context. Now, if you said Matt Hardy, Vince McMahon wanted to eat people in wheelchairs, that is not out of context. That is very much in context and accurate. So
nailed it.
Super, super great. I love that episode. Go check it out. It's one of my favorites that we've done, truthfully. TLC 1 on the Extreme Life of Matt Hardy over at extremehardy.com. And I wanted to add one more thing. I've been chugging away at the Brian Gewirtz book. There it is right back there. And man, there are so many great stories that the coolest part is he's been coloring some of the stories that you've talked about on this podcast.
Right.
And the book even starts with him in Wrestler's Court the day after WrestleMania with Edge and Christian.
I remember that day vividly. Ron was very nervous, and he was writing great material for Edge and Christian. It's when they were, at their peak as far as turning heels, and they were having such great content. Ron was working with them, and I know I feel like he went to court because he was being bribed by his employers. They were bribing him to write for them more, and they were saying that he was discriminating against the other wrestlers.
Bob Holly saw Edge give Brian a Flash action figure because Brian was a big Flash fan, and Edge had been given it at a meet and greet by a fan, and Edge didn't really care about it, so he handed it to Brian as, hey, I know you'll appreciate this. And Bob Holly reported that to the prosecutor, who, you know who that is,
Yes.
reported it to Mr. Bradshaw, and all of a sudden we've got a subpoena to Wrestlers Court coming from Stephanie McMahon. But he says it was like one of the most intense Wrestlers Courts ever. He said there were like 100+ people there in the locker room.
They were all pretty intense. I mean, I've seen some where people run out crying at the very end of it. I remember one particular diva that did.
Well, he said it got really intense, and that like Sean and Holly, Sean Waltman, like basically were going to make a charge at him. And that Pat Patterson came in and thought it was all a good nature rib and everyone's having fun. So he's like, fuck that guy. He's always going into work for himself. He's always going into business for himself. But Pat actually liked Brian. He just thought it was part of the gag. And then afterwards, he realized how much he buried him in that process. It's a great book. Go check it out. There's Just One Problem by Brian Gewirtz. Can't put it over enough. I spoke to Brian, and he'd love to chat with us here on the show. So hopefully we can make that happen.
Indeed. And once again, Brian was always a sweetheart. He was so great to work with. And he had this amazing little finger trick. His finger was double jointed, I think, and he would, go and like snap it back. And we'd get him to do the finger trick all the time. He was a good guy. He was one of those guys who you don't really expect to be in the cutthroat pro wrestling industry, but he was a real sweetheart.
Go check that out. I'll happily promote that book.
Brian Gewirtz is a real sweetheart. I just haven't seen him in a while.
Well, he's working with your buddy Dwayne over there.
Yeah.
7 bucks.
They're taking over the world.
Let's talk about a guy that took over the pro wrestling world. That's CM Punk. That's who we're discussing here on this week's Extreme Life of Matt Hardy. This episode, I don't know what to expect. I did the notes at like 2 a.m. the other day, and I was writing them all down, and I'm saying, this has a chance to be a real sleeper episode on this podcast. So I'm very excited to talk about the now former AEW World Champion CM Punk, who just had a pretty earth-shattering loss to Jon Moxley on Dynamite, which I know it amped you up. You were all about Jon Moxley in that moment. So I
mean, I was shocked at the result. I did not expect that at all. I mean, and I think in a lot of ways that was great that it went down like that, because it was a really shocking moment.
And we'll see. Maybe after this drops, they'll have already announced what the pay-per-view main event is. I'm not sure. But it definitely, as we tape this, leaves things pretty up in the air as to where things are going for All Out. But we're not just talking about what he's doing in AEW on this episode. We're going to talk about your brushes with him in WWE, and in particular, his highly contentious but also critically acclaimed feud with Jeff Hardy that you were part of in the periphery. So I'm excited to get your perspective on that, as they really tried to blend reality with kayfabe in that feud. So
they did a great job doing that.
And they did. And it would maybe lead to some residual stuff after. So we'll take a dive into that. With that said, Matt Hardy, it is episode 35 of the Extreme Life of Matt Hardy. Hit us with that Matt fact.
Matt fact: Matt loathes having to rush.
Did I make you rush for this? I'm sorry if I did.
You did not.
Okay.
That is something that has came with age. And, I say that all the time, especially if I'm doing something, I like to make sure it's done right. And I hate when I have to rush. And I feel like I make mistakes whenever I rush. I just like trying to be timely if possible. And I know I'm late here with you 4 or 5 minutes every week, but like I do like being timely, and I like being able to take my time, and whatever I'm doing, I like to do it the right way. So I hate rushing as I get older. And I think this is probably even more on my mind because my wife does stuff so quick, and she's always rushing and doing stuff. She's moving New York minute nonstop. And I'm like, slow down. We can take our time with this. We don't have to rush. Like, I need to take my time because I do a better job when I take my time. And at the end of the day, I just really hate having to rush. I feel like when I start rushing on things, I start making mistakes.
That's what happens in the ring with a lot of guys too. They start rushing. It's always good. Slow it down. Let it breathe.
Yeah.
Let it play out, which you can get at, of course, boxofgimmicks.com. Go pick up your Let It Play Out Matt Hardy t-shirt. All right, let's talk CM.
And John, I got to say, I wanted a Matt fact with a different facial expression on it.
Okay.
Facial expression.
Okay.
So
I like it. You are wildly consistent with your facial expression.
yeah.
I will say that.
Yeah. Whenever I go to that V1 place, it's pretty consistent,
Okay.
especially from the smug, sideways smile.
I like it. CM Punk, Phil Brooks, born October 26, 1978 in Chicago. It's a homecoming weekend for him. That's why we had him here on the schedule. His father was an alcoholic. That's well documented, and that resulted in him adopting a straight edge lifestyle at an early age. And now in pro wrestling and society, it's different. Straight edge is in for a lot of people. It's socially accepted. It's super cool.
Yeah.
But in the early 90s, early 2000s, when he's breaking into wrestling, being straight edge probably doesn't win you a whole lot of favors and doesn't earn you a ton of friends. So I know you guys started out that way in pro wrestling. How difficult is it to navigate in that kind of Wild West environment, as you said?
Yeah, I mean, it's still like Punk started with WWE in 2005, correct?
Yeah, 0506. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, fortunately, it was a little better at that time because things had changed a little bit. But during the 90s and in the Wild Wild West days, man, it was just so different. Like once you were there, if you didn't drink or you didn't take pills or you didn't get altered in some form or fashion, I mean, a lot of times the guys didn't even trust you. So it was very strange because like I feel like it was my generation, my brothers, Edge, Christian, those guys, you know, that first started coming in and things changed just a little bit. But like there were so many times that, you know, we were insulted or, you know, mocked because we didn't drink or do whatever, but it is what it is. And then eventually as time went on, we just became a little more accepting of things. And especially me at the time, a little bit more like, okay, it's all right to have one beer with these guys if they want to celebrate or whatever, you know, and that's when I'm 25. I don't have a beer until I'm 25. You know, Jeff, on the other hand, once he opened up that door, it went a little more crazy for him, you know, because obviously it's very well known about his past. He's had a lot of addiction issues, you know, but it was very strange because just starting like that, we were looked at as something was wrong with us or we were different. And it's very annoying to be looked at like that. So I feel Punk's pain if he comes in and there are people that give him a hard time because he is straight edge. But once again, and I've said this from day one with him, I mean, I've always respected that fact and I always respect the fact that he sticks to his guns as far as being straight edge.
In looking through his career, there are a lot of parallels that I find with your guys' journey. He starts as a backyard wrestler. We know you guys started out on the trampoline in the backyard.
Yeah.
And while some of his friends don't necessarily take pro wrestling super seriously, he endears himself to it and he really wants to make it, just like you guys did. You really wanted to make it. And he's eventually trained by Ace Steel, who, if I'm not mistaken, he works for AEW now, correct? As a producer kind of thing. That's kind of cool that he's back there with Punk as well, where he trained him. He actually, though, grows his reputation in IWA Mid-South in 2002. That was one of those really hot territories for the indies at that point.
I do remember hearing a lot of buzz about IWA. I didn't know the specifics about it, but I do remember it was a real hot territory when we first started, like with WWE, and we were kind of cutting our teeth in the early years.
That was Axl Ron's promotion. And there are a lot of stories over him not paying his talent, which I even asked Punk about in a press conference, and he popped about that because he's like, yeah, I got the same hype as I did with my IWA Mid-South days, except I actually got paid this time. So that was one of those issues there in IWA Mid-South. But he gets on a lot of people's radars through his feud with Chris Hero. He wrestles a 55-minute TLC match. You know a thing or two about those, but 55 minutes. Pretty impressive. A 93-minute 2 out of 3 falls match and several 60-minute draws. So they kind of become folklore. Do you remember hearing about Punk at this time? And what do you attest those feats to his terms of drive and motivation? Because, man, 93-minute 2 out of 3 falls match, 55-minute TLC match, that's no walk in the park.
I mean, that's a monstrous undertaking to try and do those types of matches, especially for that amount of time. And I didn't, you know, I was on the road full time, insane schedule at that time. So I wasn't aware of those. Even when I read the notes that you had created for me, like I was blown away that he kind of had these matches and that they were, you know, viral, that they were kind of the things that were his initial foundation of building his name. So it's cool. And, you know, once again, hats off to him for doing those things and creating some buzz around himself. That's what you have to do to make it when you're, you know, a no-name guy on the indie. And that's apparently what he did in those matches.
I know Punk is polarizing. He's personally one of my all-time favorites. I think I genuinely might have CM Punk in my top 10 all-time. So what I have always loved about CM Punk is that he's very deceptive in his physical makeup. You don't look at him and think, that's a great athlete. That's an all-star athlete.
Right.
His matches, and I think this is part of his charm, his matches are kind of clunky. They look like a fight. They look like a struggle. But he's so well conditioned and he's so smart in his psychology. So I'm not surprised to hear that he's able to go out and put on matches like that. Do you feel similarly about his genetics as a wrestler and what makes him up in that regard?
I mean, I definitely see what you're saying there. And I feel like a lot of people kind of buy into that fact for him, you know, that he isn't like the most athletic looking guy in the history of pro wrestling. And that sometimes his matches are a little clunky or they do look a little more real. I think I get that a little bit sometimes. And I like the fact that my matches look a little more real because I'm not as smooth as a lot of the other guys are. But I think between that and the fact that Punk is a great athlete who can do these amazing things, and he's such a wrestling fan, and he studied his project, he studied his craft, studied his project so well. He knows stuff so good. He knows what to do inside the ring. And that combined with his personality, which is extremely unique. He's one of the most unique human beings I think you'll ever meet. You know, I think those are the things that people bonded with. And on top of that, the whole straight edge thing and how he stuck to his guns the whole while. I think all those things combined are why people bonded with him so greatly.
On 2002, he's doing some stuff with TNA, but then he really gets a little bit of notoriety here with Ring of Honor. In 03, he feuds with Raven, and he compares Raven to his alcoholic father and leans in for the first time on screen into being straight edge, which, as we know, is going to become relevant later on in this episode. But it's really in 2004 that the wrestling world starts singing his praises, because that's where he has a best-of-3 series with Samoa Joe that many consider to be the greatest Ring of Honor and maybe even indie matches ever. They take everyone by... It's almost like startling seeing the caliber of matches that they're having here. The second match that they have is actually a 5-star match from Dave Meltzer. It's the first American match to get 5 stars. This blows my mind. Since Undertaker and Shawn Michaels in the Cell at Bad Blood 97. Do you remember any of that? Because you're pretty in tune with the internet at this point.
I mean, that was on a little bit bigger of a platform at Ring of Honor. I do remember hearing all the buzz about this Samoa Joe and the CM Punk. I remember there was a lot of buzz going on about those two and the series of matches they'd had. I did hear about that at the time.
Have you seen any of those matches?
I haven't. I haven't ever gone back and watched them. I've never watched. The only Ring of Honor that I feel like I truly watched is when my brother did that one little appearance, like in 2003, 2004, when he was like booed out of the building. I remember watching it there, and I kind of liked how it had the gritty feel, and I knew there was like an ECW feel to it, but it was a lot more technical than like the Wild West, use objects and fight in the fans and go crazy at ECW, you know, like their Attitude Era type shit. You know, Ring of Honor was a much more technical thing. And I thought it was a cool thing, and also thought it was going to build like a very strong cult following. And I definitely remember hearing a lot of buzz about the Punk and Samoa Joe stuff.
If you ever get a chance, Matt, if it's 2 a.m., you can't sleep, whatever it is, go out of your way and watch that second match in particular in that series. It is tremendous, and it's quite an accolade. I know we don't put too much in the star ratings and all that, but when the previous 5-star match in North America was Undertaker and Shawn Michaels, it says a little bit of something about the caliber of work those two guys were doing. But the thing about those matches is they put him on WWE's radar, and he eventually signs in 2005, right as you're coincidentally headed to Ring of Honor for a short run there. Did you guys ever cross paths? Is this your first time meeting him?
Probably my first time meeting him, unless he came around WWE as an extra. I don't know if he ever did that at all. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. I'm not sure. But that was my first time officially remembering meeting him and knowing he was, you know, creating a lot of buzz in the wrestling world. And I'll never forget whenever we were in Chicago, my last night there, my first night I beat Christopher Daniels, second show there, Homicide. And the third show was where I was teasing I was going to leave undefeated and then return to work for Vince McMahon. But like I did a deal where Roderick Strong beat me. But that night in Chicago, him and Samoa Joe took a group of guys, and I was in this guy's like downtown in Chicago, and we hung out a little bit. I remember there was this real cool hot dog hot dog trailer, and we went there, and we had a really good time that night. I remember I went on the trailer, and the girl who was working was really cool, and I was like saying, "Oh, what would you like?" I was acting like I was going to serve these guys and talking shit and having a good time. But everything was cool and fun, and I remember having a real fun time with them on that evening.
He's doing his first Summer Punk storyline at that point, where he's threatening to take the Ring of Honor world title to WWE.
Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, the last match that I was having at Ring of Honor was also his last match, correct? I think it is. I think they aligned. Like he was finishing out
right.
at that time.
That sounds about right.
I think so.
Because he would obviously go to OVW first, so
yeah.
So that would probably make sense. I can look up that show here in just a minute. So you remember him being a pretty cool, easygoing guy? Was he talkative? Did he keep to himself? He's the locker room leader there in Ring of Honor.
Yeah, I mean, I think Punk is kind of a keep to himself type guy in general. Mm-hmm. I think that's just his personality. But he was friendly. He was fine. Got along with him great. Had no issues at all with him. And I do remember him and whoever he wrestled on that final night had a great match. I don't even want to say the opponent because I don't want to get it wrong, but I do remember they had a great match and the crowd was really buzzing for it.
I want to bring this up about Punk, building off your point that you just made about him kind of being a keep to himself kind of guy.
Yeah.
One of the reasons that I thought it would be great to take a deep dive into him is because even though they are polar opposites, he and Jeff are also so similar in so many ways. There's this enigma about them.
They're both enigmas, and they're both very private people too.
People identify with both of them. People look at your brother, who's, by the way, it was his birthday this week, so happy belated birthday to him as this drops. Send our best to Jeff, please.
Good call.
But on that front, people identify with Jeff. There's that something they all aspire to have part of them that he has, and they take to him. You know, those are his people. With Punk, cult of personality is not a gimmick. People look at CM Punk as this larger-than-life figure in professional wrestling, even with all those nuances and those little quirks, and they identify and they feel with him. Would you credit a lot of that to the success that he's had in wrestling, that he's been able to lean into that and leverage that into success?
Absolutely. I mean, he also has a great work ethic, which that's undeniable. But 100%, how he leans into who he truly is, that's a huge part of his success. And that is why people identify with him. Same thing with Jeff. Jeff leans into what he is, and that's why people identify with him real well. That's just like one of those qualities that you can't really identify. It's just a quality that someone has, and people are either attracted to them and like they feel in zen with that person. You know, it's one of those things. I mean, it's the definition of that it. You know, both of those guys have it, and just leaning into whatever their it is makes people like them even more.
So Punk, this is it. He's done with Ring of Honor. He's headed towards WWE. He had a nice little run on the Indies, and I wish that had happened today, because if it did, Matt Hardy, you'd be able to check it out on IWTV. Because IWTV.live is independent wrestling's premier streaming service for live events and video on demand of past events. Now, you may have seen on AWTV, I think it was about a month ago, Wheeler Yuta versus Daniel Garcia. Mm-hmm. Well, guess what? You check out IWTV.live, because they had an even better match at IWTV 100 for the IWTV title. And you can check out the likes of Eddie Kingston, Masato Tanaka, Jonathan Gresham, and much more. And Matt Hardy.
A lot of great names on there.
There's another great name that's on there too. The quintessential host of the Extreme Life of Matt Hardy, myself. That's me. I had a very, very important, prestigious triple threat match this past week.
Oh, very much, man. What a rush.
I went off the top rope, brother.
It was truly a Hardy Boys extreme leap of faith.
It was wild. I went flying. I'm bottom heavy, so gravity didn't really work in my favor.
You're flying off the top like fear is only a 4-letter word. And I'm so glad, because of IWTV, I got to see it.
You did. There was another 4-letter word going through my head at that juncture, but that's besides the point. And then I took a big Larry to the back.
F-U-C-K?
Yes, yes.
D-A-M-N? Say it.
CLP!
But that's 3 letters.
Exclamation point. Exclamation point. That's one of my favorite things. I'll digress here real quick during this read. At ECW One Night Stand 2005, Paul Heyman looks at Edge and goes, "I got 2 words for you. Yeah. Matt freaking Hardy." And I'm like, wait a minute. That's 3 words. And Edge is like, that's 3. Love that. IWTV is your place to be, guys. For just $10 a month, IWTV.live offers 20-plus events streamed live each month from top independent wrestling. And just this past week, they had 10 live events. That's $1 an event. No better value in wrestling streaming today. And also, as an IWTV.live subscriber, you have immediate access to our extensive library of over 13,000 hours of video on-demand content from over 300 independent wrestling promotions from around the world, including Beyond Wrestling, Prestige Wrestling, Absolute Intense Wrestling, H2O Wrestling, and Limitless Wrestling. You can watch IWTV.live anytime, anywhere on Roku, Apple TV, and Amazon Fire TV Stick, including mobile apps for Apple and Android devices. There are no long-term contracts required. Just go to IWTV.live and subscribe today for just $10 a month. Great value there, Matt, isn't it?
Yeah, indeed. And like you said, John, I wish IWTV had been around back when CM Punk was having those long matches, in IWA, which made him famous back in the day and got a lot of buzz around his name. I would have loved to have checked them out on IWTV.
Absolutely. And go check out IWTV whenever you can, because it is a great service. And unlike that Peacock gimmick, you're not going to get any ads on there either. It's good stuff. All right. So CM Punk goes to WWE, signs in 2005, and that surprises a lot of people. He didn't necessarily fit the bill for your typical WWE guy, but maybe that's not a bad thing. I feel like Vince and Johnny Ace probably didn't necessarily get a guy like CM Punk off the bat. Do you remember there being any sentiment like that?
The one sentiment I remember, because obviously I knew him now after spending some time with him at Ring of Honor. And he was at OVW, correct? Is that what you
went
said?
to OVW and then the main roster.
I remember I feel like there was some people in the office were very split on him. I remember Paul Heyman was a big advocate for CM Punk, obviously, around that time. But I do know that there were forces in the office that weren't high on Punk, and they didn't really want him to come up to the main roster. And I remember him getting to the main roster and becoming as successful as he did. He overcame a lot of odds. I mean, very high odds as well. Because I do remember there were some guys that just had issues with him because he was very outspoken about things and, very outspoken about the whole straight edge thing and his whole character and the persona he, lived. So I know there were some guys that did not like him. So he overcome a lot of obstacles to actually get on the roster and especially become as hugely and massively successful as he did.
Well, he makes his in-ring debut July 4th, 2006 for the ECW brand. We are going to be talking about WWECW next week. But what do you remember his early days on the roster being like? Was ECW in that point in time a good fit for him? ECW was kind of like what NXT is now. That was kind of what the purpose of ECW was. So
right.
Was he a fit for that?
I think so. I think it was a good fit for him. It was a good starting point, where he could actually get on TV and he could really show his stuff off, because it wasn't a show that was overfilled or oversaturated with a bunch of top names on it. So it was a show that he could be on and actually highlight his abilities.
Well, the Hardys actually have a pretty substantial significance to Punk's WWE career because you're involved in his first ever pay-per-view match.
Yeah.
There's a lot of talent in this match. It's at Survivor Series in 2006. You're teaming with him and DX against Rated RKO, Mike Knox, Johnny Nitro, and the Jurassic Sandbag himself. And all of you survive. They all job out for you, especially Hurricane. He particularly jobs out. How'd you feel Punk fit with you guys on that stage? It's almost like that Sesame Street song. One of these things is not like the other.
I mean, he was people were into him at that time. I just saw a video clip just recently circulating on Twitter where it said DX and the Hardy Boys are in the ring and the crowd is chanting for CM Punk. And that's quite a statement. because we were, DX was obviously DX, two of the greatest guys to ever compete in the industry. And then Jeff and I are one of the most well-known tag teams ever, most popular tag teams ever. So for the crowd to be doing that, it definitely meant he belonged. And I remember there were a couple different trains of thoughts about that match, about how we were going to do it, but it ended up being a clean sweep at the end of the day, which I thought was cool because that's something that you rarely see happen. So I thought for the big babyface team to come in and do a clean sweep was pretty cool.
We know around that time, Triple H, Shawn Michaels have a lot of influence backstage. Yes. And we know as time would unfold that Triple H and CM Punk didn't always necessarily see eye to eye. Right. Do you remember there being any tension back in 2006 where he's the young gun of this team and they're the leaders? Were there any comments thrown around, anything of that nature?
No, there wasn't any tension. I mean, I don't feel like Punk had been established enough or was powerful enough for there to be tension with Triple H, if that makes sense.
Sure. Well, my gut says that Triple H wasn't checking out too much ECW at the time. I think he had his own fish to fry. And Punk would spend a few years on ECW, and eventually he wins the world title in 2007. So you can say what you want about Punk, or you can say what you want about the ECW brand at the time, but I don't think that you can deny he's one of the few true success stories that comes from that brand and what its purpose was in developing talent. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think there were a few guys that ended up being really successful because of ECW. I think it was just a great platform for them to excel. And I think for me, I think it helped me out a lot. I think it did great things for Robbie Lashley. I think it did great things for Punk. I mean, I think Christian did an amazing job when he was there at ECW. I mean, there are a lot of guys that Vince might not have seen as like a top-tier, top guy, but guys that he had a lot of faith in and guys that he wanted to be successful, and he gave them an opportunity on ECW. And I feel like a lot of guys really capitalized on that.
And again, we'll be talking about that more next week here on The Extreme Life of Matt Hardy. We're going to do a full episode on WWE ECW and Matt's run as world champion there. So get ready for that next week. Now, Punk would win Money in the Bank at WrestleMania 24. He'd actually cash in on Edge to win his first main roster. I'm not including ECW here. First WWE World Heavyweight Championship.
Right.
But this is where things kind of begin for Punk in WWE in terms of tension. He's never really positioned as a top guy. He doesn't even get to drop the title properly. He does an injury angle and they just strip him of it. What was the perception of him as a champion at the time backstage?
I honestly don't remember. I don't even know if we were on the same brands at those times. And was he legitimately injured?
No, they just did an injury angle.
Oh, I mean, because that I have no memory of him dropping the title, which means it was something very unimportant that they did on TV. So I honestly don't know, but I do know there were forces within WWE, probably Triple H and probably Vince that just they didn't think Punk was going to be their guy. So I mean that obviously works against you if you have guys that feel like that about you.
It's weird because they see clearly enough that he's connecting with fans to a degree that they're willing to give him a shot with the world title, right? That can't be. Nobody just arbitrarily gets a world title shot.
Sure.
He gets it, and he cashes in on Edge. That's a big deal. But he's never positioned as the A champion at any point during that run. So I think it just is interesting foreshadowing in that regard. But we'd see more of him.
And also I do think him winning a world title, like you said, on a main show was just a great tool to build him as well in terms of being a superstar. So I feel like that was great that he was gifted with that opportunity as well.
You guys did actually team once together around this time. It was a June 24th, 2008 episode of ECW against Miz and Morrison. And you told me that you've got a fun little story about this match.
Yeah, I want to say that is when we'd been drafted to different places, and I think I'm going to ECW. I'm not sure where Punk
This is right when he wins the world title. This is right around that time.
Yeah, but there was a point in there because he'd always, for the longest time ever, I'd always done the close on the corner, and then I turn around and run out and do the bulldog. He does the knee in the corner, turn around, run out and do the bulldog. And we were just joking on that occasion. I said, dude, what if we do that the bulldog to those guys, but we take a step further out and we slap and do a high five in the middle of the ring. And I want to say Arn Anderson was our agent or producer coach, and he laughed, and it's very much up his alley to kind of be a rebel and be rebellious in your match or whatever. And I was like, well, I think we should just do it. Like if they get mad at it, we'll just ask for forgiveness after. And he's like, yeah. And that's why we ended up doing it. And I remember we went and did that high five. And it was like one of those cold things, like guys in the locker room loved it, obviously, but it was like one of those things like, come on, this is the course of a wrestling match. And you guys are out there giving a high five. I'm sure Jim Cornette would hate it. Him and those FIs, they would hate it. I'm positive. But that is what myself and CM Punk did. We decided not to even tell them we were going to do it. We just went to business for ourselves and did it in the ring.
You got along.
I love that. There's a little gif of that, or GIF, as you say, and it's one of my favorites.
You got along with him pretty well at that time.
Yeah.
Did Arn Anderson like it?
I think I don't think he was crazy about it, but I think he was okay with it, and we just said, we just kind of felt it. We just called it out there, brother. We felt it. We felt it. We felt the high five.
Arn is one of my favorite people in professional wrestling, and
Arn's the best.
He has the driest sense of humor I've ever seen, and it is just incredible. You want to see art? Go watch the AEW with RJ City and Arn Anderson, because RJ's gimmick where he pokes and pokes and pokes, and Arn no-sells the entire time.
It's a true Michelangelo, huh?
Yes, it is art. Go check that out if you haven't, guys. AEW on the AEW YouTube channel. Now, Punk goes on to win Money in the Bank again the next year, 2 years in a row. So clearly people are recognizing there's something there. Paul Heyman's gone at the time. Do you remember there being any advocates for CM Punk that you can call back to?
I mean, I think the biggest advocate for CM Punk at that time was just the crowd and their reactions, and how much they were invested in him, and I mean, once someone gets over with the crowd, I mean, it's undeniable. So I think the crowd and his fan base are the people that were his advocates more than anybody else at that time.
It's fair. Certainly fair. So here we go, Matt. Extreme Rules 2009. Your brother Jeff faces Edge in a ladder match, and he wins the World Heavyweight Championship. It's a heck of a match.
Yeah.
Jeff's the
top. Just stuck in the ladder for the finish. I remember that.
Yes, it's awesome. Well. Awesome visual. Jeff is the top babyface on SmackDown at the time, and arguably maybe even in the company. Punk is also a babyface at the time, and he cashes in, wins the title, and the crowd is stunned. They can't believe it. They've never seen a babyface cash in on another babyface when they were down. This is something a little different. What do you think of the storytelling here?
I mean, I thought it was a great angle. It really worked well, especially considering they knew they were going to start evolving Punk into a heel at that time. I thought that was done very well. It feels like something that would be done in 2022, so it was almost ahead of its time.
The character that Punk is going to portray here, even though he does it a little more subtly and over time, is somewhat similar to Big Money Matt, where everything feels justified.
Right.
He has his reasonings. He genuinely believes he's doing for the good of the people here. And those are the best heels. The best heels are the ones who truly believe their shit.
Of course. There's some sort of credibility to it.
Exactly. So it's a pretty stunning moment to go off the air for Extreme Rules. What did you think of the initial pairing of Punk and Jeff here?
They worked really well together, and they are total opposites. As we'd said before, there is a lot of similarities between them, as they both have this it factor, as they both have their cult fan base, and they both really inspire people. People gravitate towards them because they oh my God, that person, that's how I feel. The way that person speaks and what he says he is and what he does and how he lives, that's how I feel. And I think that's why they worked so well together. They had great chemistry in the ring, and they also had really good chemistry in their promos. And I think Punk really started excelling in his promo game at that time. And I think Jeff actually stepped up his stuff for the things he did at that time as well.
Watching their matches back for this in terms of research, it's very clear that they are pushing each other in a positive way. They're
Right.
pushing each other to bring the best out of each other in these segments, in these matches. I think it's truly one of the more underrated feuds of that era of WWE. And if you haven't checked it out, I recommend you doing so because we're going to dive into it here. So,
I do. Sorry, I want to interrupt you real quick.
Go ahead.
A memory just popped in my head. I remember there was one time where they were working on a house show and just said, yeah, maybe right there, just like, stop me and snap memory over and like grab a chin lock and we'll kind of work it and chill for a second, just so it's easy and we can kind of slow down for a minute. And I remember Jeff said, it'll be like easy for a minute or whatever. And I'm going to catch your breath. And like Punk's like, no, he said, I don't do boring. I don't do that. We need to keep moving there. And Jeff was like, hold up. Like doing this house show, whatever. But I mean, Punk did have that kind of drive. And I remember that was one of those things Jeff told me in a joking way. I was like, yeah, let's just chill, do something easy. We can catch our breath for a second because we're going to go again hard in just a minute. And Punk's like, no, that's not what I do. I'm not here to do stuff that's boring or things that are slow. We got to go. Which is a very funny story in hindsight.
Do you think that's a credit to how he has built his chemical makeup, where he always had to punch up his entire life, right?
Yeah, probably so.
He was a bit of an outcast. He had the alcoholic father. He had a rough relationship with some of his siblings. You're in Chicago. It's rough and tough. I feel like that's part of the element that makes CM Punk so endearing to so many people.
I mean, I think Punk has very high expectations in everything he does. I remember after he left WWE, there was a point where he said, like, he never got to be the last match in WrestleMania, so he never made it. But, he worked against – I mean, he did. He made it. He went above and beyond what he ever should have done, and I guess that's who he is, but he should be very proud of what he did do there because he killed it. He had a WrestleMania match with The Undertaker. He was one of the featured main events, even though he didn't technically go on last. He did it. He was a main event and a big deal to WrestleMania. So he succeeded.
I don't disagree. That's one of my favorite Undertaker streak matches. I was there for that. And very rarely do I get fooled on a near fall, but I almost came this close to thinking CM Punk might just beat The Undertaker after he beat him over the head with the urn and he puts him in the Undertaker pin, sticks his tongue out. It was an awesome visual. So go check that out. WrestleMania 29. That's one of my favorite Undertaker streak matches for sure. But you mentioned that Punk has that drive. He wants to go hard every day. You know why? I venture to guess this. I don't know this for a fact, but I venture to guess that CM Punk
AG1s.
Loves his AG1s, Matt Hardy. He loves his AG1s. CM Punk loves his AG1s. Why do you love your AG1s?
I love my AG1s because they keep me young. Once again, I'm down 2 more pounds this week. Working
Very
hard,
nice.
diet, working hard on training. Sticking to it. And what is the backbone of my game plan? It is my AG1s because I wake up, I take them, and it makes my day better right from the jump.
It's one delicious scoop of AG1, and you're absorbing 75 high-quality vitamin minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to help start your day right. It's a special blend of ingredients supporting your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, your energy, recovery, focus, aging, all of those things. And we want to help you incorporate AG1 into your life because we love this product here. It is lifestyle friendly. Whether you eat keto, paleo, vegan, dairy-free, or gluten-free, it contains less than 1 gram of sugar, no GMOs, no nasty chemicals or artificial anything, while still tasting good. Matt Hardy, if you're not sleeping well, you can delete that poor sleep because this will improve your sleeping quality. It will improve your mental clarity. It will improve your alertness.
Indeed, it will.
It's the one thing with the best things. Athletic Greens uses the best of the best products based on the latest science with constant product iterations and third-party testing, and it costs you less than $3 a day. You're investing in your health. It's cheaper than your cold brew habit. It's cheaper than getting all those different supplements yourself. You're investing in an all-in-one nutritional insurance. Matt Hardy, if you go into your medicine cabinet, you got all those supplements. What can you do to those since you have AG1?
Delete!
You can delete all of them because it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition. Just 1 scoop in a cup of water every day. That's it. No need for a million different pills and supplements to look out for your health. And to make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D. And how many free travel packs with your first purchase?
5 free packs.
All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/Hardy. Again, that is athleticgreens.com/Hardy to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. And we thank them for sponsoring the extreme life of Matt Hardy. Feel like we've got the chemistry down at this point, Matt, where it's just like clicking the soundboard. I'm just like, all right, Matt Hardy, hit the 5, go.
Yeah.
Hit the delete, go.
we do have that down.
Dance for me, monkey, dance.
Exactly. That's what I do best.
I liked your match against Ricky Shane Page, by the way. That was you were doing a little dance in that. You were taking him through the motions there. Your wife had a hard time understanding what RSP was on her Twitch stream.
Right.
It was good stuff. Go check it out on Dark Elevation.
We actually did quite a bit in 3.5 minutes.
You did?
In Ring Time was. It was quite a bit.
You did?
Look like a lot more than that.
And Private Party showed their faces.
I told them to keep their distance. Andrade is going to be hot. Andrade started tweeting me last night after he saw that.
I know. Well, fuck Jose, am I right?
Yeah, fuck Jose. Jose is a fucking idiot.
No doubt about that.
He is the definition of an FI.
Maybe even a CLP, too. Maybe.
I don't even know if I would give him that much credit.
Okay.
Maybe I would.
Let's get back on track here. So after Punk cashes in, he's starting to turn heel. And he's the heel that thinks he's a babyface, right? So They have a match at the Bash where Punk hurts his eye. And in the process, he kicks the referee thinking that it's Jeff because he can't see, of course, Matt Hardy. And he gets DQ'd. And what happens when you get DQ'd? You retain the title.
Right.
What did Jeff think of this booking here as you're laying the groundwork for Punk turning?
He probably didn't think of anything. He's like, okay, well, we're just getting a DQ tonight. That's what's happening. That's how Jeff doesn't overthink anything.
That's fair. I hate DQ finishes. I've talked about this ad nauseum,
especially in a main event promoted match. Yeah.
But when you're adding the layers of the storytelling, where Punk, we know he's not fully heel yet, but we're adding these little characteristics that are leaving hints of where he's going, and it leads to that DQ finish. And now we know that we're going to get a match where Punk is a true heel. I think I can stomach that. I think I'm okay with that level of storytelling. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I thought his evolution and transformation into being a bad guy was done pretty well. And it was teased throughout. And it works for that. That scenario works in the big scheme of things.
In the following weeks, though, Punk starts to criticize Jeff's rock star lifestyle. He's full on heel here.
Right.
He's holier than thou because he's straight edge. He's talking about Jeff's real life struggles with addiction, his suspensions.
Right.
You and I both know this is territory that WWE certainly has never hesitated to cross into, and it's all for the heat, brother.
Right.
But does it hit a little too close to home? How do you feel about that sort of business?
I mean, I think if you have someone that, is truly an addict that really has those issues, I think it's something you have to be very careful of, because it can kind of chip away at somebody's sobriety if someone is trying to get in a good place, and that keeps being brought up over and over and over again. But also at this time, I remember Jeff said, dude, this is like, because we're the polar opposites, like, go crazy. Like, whatever you want to say about addictions or my rockstar lifestyle, drug issues, go ahead. It's great for our story. It's great for our angle, and it's perfect for your character. And it makes you an amazing, hypocritical bad guy towards me, because you're saying all this stuff is wrong with me, even though you're the bad guy in the scenario. And Jeff was totally open with that. And I always told Punk, like, yeah, go crazy. Like, nothing's off limits, like whatever you want to do. He was very, very open and willing to work with Punk at that time.
So from your perspective, they're enjoying working with each other. There's no issues here. Everyone seems to be on the same page.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Jeff is about to win the title back. But before he does, there are some rumors that start circulating that he could be on his way out of the promotion. Right. What do you remember about where Jeff was at mentally, physically at the time? There's some talk that he might want to start a reality show. Where was he?
Jeff Jeff was having back issues at that time. His back was beat up, obviously, from just the way he wrestles, and he had a pretty bad case of restless leg syndrome at that time because he was working so much. And Jeff is one of those guys that is so dedicated to his fans. You know, if he's wrestling on a house show, he feels like I have to give them all of my big stuff. You know, they have to see a Whisper in the Wind every night. They have to see a Swanton. They have to see these big bumps and the things that they pay to see Jeff Hardy. You know, so he fully believed in that. But he was beat up, and he wanted time off. And I feel like they wanted to give him the title to try and reward him and keep him around and give him to resign, because he was there was a point in time where he was like the biggest merch selling for a quarter or two, bigger than John Cena. He was over as a motherfucker at that time. And whenever Jeff decided to leave, I remember he was torn. Like he didn't necessarily want to leave, but he felt like I need to leave and I need to take time off and try and heal up and like see if there's other stuff I can do in life as well. That's when the music bug had first started to bite him. And there was someone had reached out to him about doing a reality show. And that was something, I mean, you brought that up in the notes, that was something that was a reality that had been discussed or whatever. But at the end of the day, they gave Jeff a real nice goodbye where they had that cage match and he left. And I remember his last words is like, when it comes to WWE, this is not goodbye forever, it's goodbye for now, or whatever he said at the very end of that match.
You brought up an interesting point that I want to just make here and hit. You said he was outselling John Cena. There were only two guys during John Cena's whole Super Cena run at the top of WWE, two full-time guys that ever outsold John Cena in merchandise. Do you know who they are?
I'm going to guess it would be Jeffrey Nero Hardy, the charismatic enigma, and the straight-edge superstar, CM Punk. Am I correct?
How crazy is that?
It's pretty wild, yeah.
So the genesis of all that really being underlined here in this feud, again, so many parallels, yet so many differences between them.
Right.
It's really cool to think about that. So Jeff
that's a super neat fact also.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Jeff wins the belt back at Night of Champions. Mm-hmm. People, they're really digging their work together. Their matches are being really well received. And like I said, I really think this is one of the better parts of WWE TV that year. And now it's time for Matt Hardy to get involved. Mm-hmm. So Punk gets a rematch for the title on SmackDown from Teddy Long, holla holla. But Vince McMahon adds a special guest enforcer. And it's you. Now, you and Jeff had fought at WrestleMania earlier that year, and we're going to cover that long form here on the Extreme Life of Matt Hardy. Mm-hmm. But now, you're here to make things fair. You pull the ref on Punk as he's about to win, and it helps Jeff pick it up in return. It's your babyface turn. It feels strange to me, having paid attention to the programming, given what you did to Jeff earlier that year, where we're pointing to you as the man that burned down his house, essentially. And leaning into all that stuff, that all of a sudden you are a beloved babyface helping your brother out.
That had happened. Like, once again, like people, especially in the standard traditional context of like Matt Hardy versus Jeff Hardy, two very serious wrestlers wrestling one another, they just never fully got behind it because people would just rather see us together. They would just rather see us together as a team. And then I was legitimately hurt whenever I was gone during that time. I'd had the broken hand, and then I had a thing where my intestines ruptured through my abdominal wall and had to have that surgery done. So I was gone for a while, and they knew Jeff was leaving at that time once he wrapped up his thing with Punk, and he was going to take time off once again for injuries that had been building up, you know, over the past couple of years for him. So they decided to bring me back as a babyface Hardy, just to be a Hardy presence, you know, and maybe kind of try and help take up a little bit of the space that was going to be gone whenever Jeff left. So that was pretty much the mindset behind that. And especially without not trying to play off of Jeff as being a heel. A lot of times when I wrestled other baby faces as a heel, I would still get cheered. Mm-hmm. And it was just, you know, it's a weird thing. And they just said, well, we might as well bring you back as a babyface. So we might as well go ahead and realign you with your brother before he leaves. And that way you kind of get the babyface rub and you're back as a babyface Hardy, which hopefully we can relay that into things to make money and utilize you in a good way.
Did it have anything to do, because you've referenced this multiple times in the past, you referenced it a couple weeks ago with the Ken Kennedy stuff, did it have anything to do with maybe potentially lining someone up for Punk down the line and giving him someone to work with? Because once Jeff's gone, you're going to work with Punk for a little bit here.
I mean, maybe. I mean, and it's also a pretty natural progression as well. You know, obviously at that time, especially coming right back, I wasn't anywhere near Jeff's level. You know, but just to come back and do a story with Punk is something that does make sense, and it's pretty natural and organic.
Yeah. Were you happy to be back as a babyface in that role there?
Yeah, I think so. I enjoyed the stuff I did as a heel. I wish it would have been done a little differently. I think it could have been a little more successful, especially if we would have done our thing, and you know, I would have been healthy enough to like go into a massively different direction in some sort of environment I felt like I could have succeeded in.
Mm-hmm.
But considering what we had and Jeff was going to be gone, I was happy to be back as a babyface, and because I feel like when you hear the name Hardy and you think of Hardy Boys, you typically think babyface first and foremost. So it was cool, and I was happy to be back in that moment. And you know, especially for the people that it was real to them at that time, be back on the same page as my brother, and people could accept that I didn't legitimately in a shoot cannon burn his house down.
That's good to know. I was a little worried about that. We are going to cover that long form, guys. I promise you that. There must be some insane stories from that feud in terms of getting all that put together. So I look forward to that. So Punk eventually gets the belt back from Jeff in a 4.25 star match at SummerSlam, according to Dave Meltzer. This is my favorite match between them. I think it's a heck of a match, and you should all go out of your way to go check that out at SummerSlam 2009. Then they wrestle a loser leaves WWE cage match on SmackDown, which Punk wins, and as you said, Jeff gives that little goodbye there.
Right.
So he is on his way out, and it's a pretty emotional night. Those WWE fans, I was watching it back, man. Listen, like adults love Jeff Hardy. They love Matt Hardy. That's great. Those kids are crushed seeing Jeff lose and seeing him leave. That's got to be hard for a performer, seeing kids feel that way about and with a performer, isn't it?
It can be tough, but I mean, it's also very, very humbling, and it's also very rewarding. It shows that there's people that have connected with you and people that are invested in you, and hopefully it's people that you inspire. So it's also one of the things we do this for, I think.
I was healing it up before my match earlier this week, and I was talking to some people, and there's a little 5-year-old girl, and she comes up to me, and she's like, "You stink." And I got down to her face, like I got down to her level. I kneeled down, and I go, her mom's right behind her. I go, "You are just the cutest little mistake I've ever seen." And her mom's like, "Hey, take that back, take that back." And I was like, she doesn't know what I'm talking about. It's all good. But deep down, I was like, man, it's so cool that a little kid loves wrestling so much that they want to be here. They want to be at a show like this. So seeing them react like that to Jeff leaving is a very authentic, special thing. And it is played into the next week because on SmackDown, this is an all-time great SmackDown segment, in my opinion. Yeah. Jeff's music hits, and they pan the crowd, and all they're showing are all these kids going nuts. They are going crazy because they think Jeff Hardy's here, and Jeff Hardy's here. Look at him come out. It's not Jeff Hardy. It's CM Punk dressed as Jeff Hardy. A very convincing Jeff Hardy cosplay, may I add. And this is some big-time heat for CM Punk. What do you remember about this?
I remember thinking it was done extremely well, and he killed it. He did a great job with it.
You would actually come out to confront him in Jeff's honor. The two of you have a bunch of matches together for the rest of 2009. You even get some title matches out of it, some world heavyweight titles matches out of it. Do you think you guys were hitting your stride in terms of chemistry together?
I enjoyed working with Punk. I felt like we had some good matches, and I don't remember a lot about that time in all actuality, but I do know that the matches were always very enjoyable.
You wrestled him in Bangor, Maine, by the way. Just so you know.
Oh yeah, the very famous town of Bangor, Maine.
Yes, of course. So what do you think Jeff's feud with CM Punk did for CM Punk in terms of elevating him into an accepted main event talent? As I said, a year prior, he wins the world title, but he's not a top guy. How do you think the feud with Jeff elevated him?
I think it solidified that he was not only just a legitimate top guy, but he was also a legitimate hill that was at the top of the food chain, because he had so much great content to work with when it came to Jeff, and Jeff was open and down for him saying all that stuff and doing all that stuff. I mean, it was like, he could really dig deep and like talk as much shit as he wanted to. And it was great to make people hate him. So he did an amazing job with that. And also Jeff was the perfect player to play off of because he was open to everything. He didn't mind. He was like, go crazy. And that's one thing it kind of takes in pro wrestling. If you really want to like mix the lines of reality and fantasy, you have to have guys that are open to like you bringing up their past and their demons and their mistakes and their personal life things that they a lot of people get uncomfortable or feel squirmy talking about. And Jeff was okay with all that. So, I mean, that worked for Punk and he capitalized on it, man.
Do you remember Jeff being happy with the feud and how it all played out?
Yeah, Jeff was. Jeff enjoyed it.
Yeah. What I love about Punk here is that he continues to invent himself as a heel, and he'd actually start the Straight Edge Society gimmick with Doc Gallows and Serena, where he's really leaning into these religious tie-ins. He quite literally grows his hair and beard to a point where he almost looks like he's embodying Jesus Christ himself. And he makes himself a martyr for being straight edge. This is where I feel his mic skills really took to another level in WWE. What'd you think of the Straight Edge Society character? Me knowing you, I believe you probably would have really dug the work he was doing with that.
I mean, I thought it was great how he was running a little cult in the Straight Edge Society. But I cannot believe more than anything else that Luke Gallows was a member of a Straight Edge Society. I don't think anyone in the history of pro wrestling or the industry would believe that for 1 second. I want to say I think Punk reprimanded him for being at the bar and drinking while he was in the Straight Edge Society.
I'm just thinking about our panel.
Yeah, right. Carl, the Straight Edge Society. Are you kidding me?
Carl sits down next to me, and I look and I go, "What do you got? Kool-Aid there?"
I'm pretty sure Punk had to reprimand him many times for being hammered at the bar.
Hey, but that's where we see Serena Deeb for the first time, and dude, I think Serena Deeb's truly one of the most underrated women's wrestlers in the world, and I could watch her work any day. I know she's a big influence backstage in AEW right now, so this was a cool little spot for her. But neither of you were in the company at this point, but the Summer of Punk 2 begins in 2011. He does the famous pipe bomb promo, and wrestling has kind of changed forever after that. It's a fresh air to WWE. Again, you're on the outside, but in hindsight, looking back, what do you think of the Summer of Punk and everything he did there?
The biggest thing I remember is, if I'm not mistaken, he beat John Cena in Chicago, and then he like walked out with the title, right?
5-star match in Chicago.
I remember that match created an insane amount of buzz, and at that point, like Punk was on top of the world. So that's what I remember mainly about that, and I want to say that's probably like the exclamation point on the Summer of Punk, if I'm not mistaken. But I just remember how huge of a match that was.
It was maybe the most unpredictable match I can remember in my time as a wrestling fan.
And nobody knew. The pipe bomb also happened right before that.
A couple weeks before that.
A couple weeks before that, right?
What'd you think of the pipe bomb? Where does that sit in terms of all-time great wrestling promos, in your opinion?
Jesus, I would honestly have to go back and watch it. I haven't watched it in forever. Yeah. I remember whenever it happened. I remember it got a huge amount of buzz. And there's always, in pro wrestling, when there's like some sort of segment that people are just talking about around the world, that it's a huge deal. And I remember the pipe bomb was one, and I remember the deal where he won the title and left in Chicago was a big deal. So I do remember those things stood out greatly. I want to say at this point, I was doing Ring of Honor, I was doing Indies, I was doing my stuff or whatever. I had just got married a little while earlier, so I like wasn't in tune with WWE as much as I had been in the past. But I do know that was a huge time for Punk.
Yes, it was. And it's what elevated him to that next level. There's no doubting that. Even though the Summer of Punk, they dropped the ball on it pretty substantially, he still became an elevated main event guy that, as I just said before, he outdrew John Cena in merchandise, and that is all the barometer.
That's a statement.
Yeah,
that's a statement.
Very much so. All the barometer you need to know. Now, that was a high point for CM Punk, but there was a little bit of a low point between you two and Punk, and you two being Jeff, pronouns pal. So it appears that at some point between 2009 and 2011, some heat of some sort developed between the Hardys and CM Punk. At the Breaking Point pay-per-view in 2009, right after Jeff was gone, Jeff had some issues with the law.
Mm-hmm.
He was arrested.
Mm-hmm.
And Punk references in his promo on the pay-per-view how he was right all along about Jeff Hardy. And all you got to do is look up TMZ, see all the headlines on the internet. You won't be seeing CM Punk with a mugshot, but you'll be seeing Jeff Hardy with one. And then a few months later in 2010, a video surfaces of Jeff and yourself, but mostly Jeff, saying some less than flattering things about CM Punk. What kind of comment do you have to offer on this? How did that heat develop, and where did things go from there?
I mean, obviously, when that arrest went down with Jeff was not in a good place in life in general. And I feel like because Jeff had just been so open and giving to Punk about talking about his addictions and situations and suspensions and everything else in their program, I think Jeff really started to resent Punk after he said that, when they were no longer in an angle. And it was like real life for Jeff. Jeff felt like that was a low blow. And I just know that was a big turning point that just made him resent Punk, especially when he felt like he had done a lot to help Punk, and he had given Punk so much ammunition to use against him in their program. And like he left like fine with Punk, cool with Punk. And I think it was from that point, the deeper Jeff got into his addiction at that point, you see this resentment come out. And it comes out in a very unflattering way. And once again, myself, I wasn't in the best place at that point either, but and I'm going to have my brother's back, and I always will. I mean, he is blood, and, as I've said before, blood over everything, so I think that's where that stemmed from. And I think once Jeff got through the whole Victory Road thing, and Jeff totally got away from the pill issue, and not even going to talk about going forward, but I mean, that's when it became an alcohol thing. That's when Jeff would never take a pill again after the whole Victory Road thing. I mean, Jeff just kind of changed his mentality. He's like, I mean, whatever. I kind of see what Punk was doing. And Jeff let bygones be bygones, and he had no issue with them. And I feel like that's kind of how we both are now. Like, there's been times in the past where we had issues with someone, or, felt like they had wronged us or whatever, but just like, life's just too fucking short, man, to fucking harbor resentment and to be angry or to be mad. And I feel like Jeff certainly moved past that. And I definitely know that's my mentality. I mean, life's too short, and life is too good to spend your time being miserable and to spend your time resenting people, or even just spend your time angry. Like, fuck, be happy, smile. Life's short. Enjoy it. It's actually good if you try to.
I will play two devil's advocate points here, one for Jeff and one for Punk. On Jeff's side, it does feel like low-hanging fruit when it's all cool and great when you have an angle and Jeff can respond and Jeff can have a match where he wins because it's comeuppance on the heel. But when Jeff is not there to respond, it does feel like you're taking a cheap shot a little bit. So I understand the frustration. But on the flip side, we also don't know that CM Punk was the one that came up with that line. There's a whole writer's room in WWE. And if they're saying to CM Punk, hey, go out here and say that, well, then guess what? CM Punk's got to go out and say that. If Vince McMahon wants that said, then that's what's going to happen on the pay-per-view. Is it not?
Absolutely. And in hindsight, I mean, even I had heard that clip recently, and just it's great material it's a fucking great material for Hill, so it is what it is. And who knows what its origin was, if it was Vince McMahon, if it was whatever. I mean, at the end of the day, Jeff knows that he fucked up and he made mistakes, and he owns them, and it is what it is, and he gets past it. So same thing here. Like, I have zero issues with Punk. and it is what it is.
So things are pretty dormant for a few years, and then, well, we know what happens. January 2014 rolls around, and CM Punk walks out of WWE. A lot of people are thinking, he'll be back. He's just upset. He'll be back. Not the case. He legitimately walks out of WWE and stays gone forever. And it was one of the most tension-filled and speculative times I can remember in my time as a wrestling fan. And I can only imagine being in the industry at the time, what that must have been like, all the rumors among the boys, especially knowing how secretive Punk is and how personal and private he is. It must have been so bizarre seeing, and you're actually one of the few wrestlers that spoke out about it on Twitter. And you are in Punk's corner here. You say, quote, on Twitter, so Punk allegedly walked out and quit WWE. Interesting. It's impossible to understand the toll that job can have on you unless you've lived it. A screw you from Punk? No. Punk's got to prioritize his own sanity and health. Sometimes WWE isn't conducive to those two things. From my experience, when you're in constant physical pain, frustrated the majority of the time, and resent what you love, things have to change. Thought that's...
I stand by that.
Yeah.
Currently, today.
Why did you feel compelled to speak up about that?
I mean, because I understood it. I mean, I feel like even when I was there, I should have probably left and taken time off before I did. But I just let my passion and just my love for doing it, and also the fact that it's just like this gig that you don't want to let go of because you want to make all the money in it you can or whatever. But it's just like I burnt myself out. I was so fucking hurt and beat up that I was taking pills to fucking get through shit. And once again, him sticking to his straight edge guns. I mean, that's not something he was going to do. But like once you get fucking beat up and you're super frustrated there, you have to realize sometimes you just have to go away. You have to go away and get healthy, not just physically, but also mentally and emotionally, especially when those schedules were so super demanding. And just every time you wrestled, if you're in a spot where they need you to produce each and every week, it is just so fucking taxing. So, I mean, I get that. And I'm not there. I don't know any of the details, but I understand that mindset and that, you know, that rationale of leaving. Like, I've had enough. I can't do this anymore. I mean, I do get that, especially if it is from physical injury and you're burnout. Like, it's different if you leave because there's like a difference of opinion or creative stuff. It's just like you try and work that out. But I mean, if you are physically, mentally, and emotionally like burnout and hurting, I understand why you have to get away. And I feel like they've gotten better about that as time has ticked on. And AEW is certainly great about that. They will give guys time off when they need that. And guys do. This is a very taxing, brutal industry, you know, where our bodies, blood, bones, and flesh aren't meant to be slammed on wood and steel, you know, several nights a week. You know, so it is something that is difficult to do. And once you get to that point where your body is fucked up, you can't push through. You have to remain healthy. You have to remain healthy, and you have to worry about your real life.
I've had a hypothesis about Punk's walkout that I've had some people disagree with me on, but I'm curious as to what your thoughts are.
Sure, hit me with it.
I believe CM Punk walking out of WWE when he did is the catalyst that ultimately led us to AEW. Because Punk walking out, disenfranchised a lot of WWE fans who were big supporters of him. Mm-hmm. And it brought light to all these issues of treatment towards wrestlers and some people, and of course, some of it was from his own perspective, but it brought light to guys feeling like maybe they weren't getting their worth in WWE. And it sparked this fire online and amongst fans that maybe there's some other stuff out there. If our top guy, our favorite guy, is not going to be treated well, so much to the point that he's going to leave, well, maybe there are other options somewhere. Where else could he potentially show up? And around that point is when New Japan and Ring of Honor starts to get really hot. And as we've discussed here, without Ring of Honor and New Japan getting really hot, AEW doesn't exist because All In doesn't happen as a result of Ring of Honor and New Japan. So in my mind, maybe I'm stretching things a little bit there, but I feel that was the major catalyst for there could be some other people running the territories here.
It's a very interesting theory. And I mean, I can see where you're coming from. And I can half-ass buy into that too, John.
I just think that he opened a lot of eyes that there is a world outside of WWE when you're willing to walk out of the bubble. And that led to a lot of different things happening. I'm curious what you guys have to think at us. Tweet us at Matt Hardy Pod, at John Alba, at Matt Hardy Brand. I'd love to hear what people think about that.
And it really makes me wonder what the communication was between Punk and between
he got fired on his wedding day
and AAA. I really would love to. I mean, before he walked out, what was their level of communication? You know, I mean, was this something he had stressed to them over and over? I mean, I wasn't there, obviously, so I can't speak on what happened because I don't know the details. You know, once again, I'm just taking my guess, and I am saying if you are physically fucked up, you know, and that's also going to take a toll on you mentally and emotionally as well. It's like sometimes you just have to get away. You have to get away and worry about yourself and put yourself and your personal life first. So I just wonder what their line of communication was, and like what was the final failure which led to Punk leaving like that.
Well, he walked out of WWE, but he could have actually hopped in his car and taken a drive out of the arena instead had he had CarShield, Matt Hardy. Because CarShield makes it easy and affordable to protect my car from expensive repairs, and that's just for starters. CarShield is the #1 auto protection company in the U.S. and offers protection plans for around $100 a month. The plans cover more parts than ever before, whether your car's got 5,000 miles on it, 10,000 miles on it, or 150,000 miles on it. And let me tell you how simple it is to get your car fixed. If you're like Matt Hardy and you're on the road, there's an accident ahead, you end up over a median, your gas tank is ripped halfway open and you can only fill it up halfway. Well, CarShield has got you covered. You choose the mechanic and CarShield's administrators handle the rest. That's it. You don't have to deal with the paperwork or headaches. You're taken care of. Same goes if your car breaks down, you're stuck on the side of the road. Plans go through CarShield to include coast-to-coast roadside assistance. Their administrators are there for you with rental car options and trip reimbursement at no extra cost. Matt Hardy, this would have been so valuable when you were teetering there on the median. The headbangers are freaking out. Jeff Hardy's trying to keep his calm. Would have been nice to have CarShield, wouldn't it have been?
Oh, it would have been great to have CarShield. And it makes me think, even that day when Punk was going to leave, even if someone in the office tried to stop him and slash his tires, he would have called CarShield, make it a king, give him new tires.
And he would have gone to pick the mechanic too to install that. And you can get your coverage today. Lock in your price now. It's never going to go up. That means as long as you own your car, no matter how old it is, you're protected from the rising costs of parts and repairs for your vehicle. CarShield helps protect my wallet from expensive car repairs. They're going to do the same for you too. Go to carshield.com/podcast to start your plan. Lock in your pricing forever. That's carshield.com/podcast. A deductible may apply. Did you ever have your tires slashed by fans or anything of that nature? That's heat, brother.
I'll be honest. I never have had my tires slashed.
That's good.
I haven't had that much heat, or they couldn't find my car.
That's good. Okay. And you've got CarShield, so it wouldn't matter anyway.
Yeah.
So, all right. So Punk goes on a 7-year hiatus from wrestling. And the biggest thing he does, truthfully, is the Colt Cabana podcast that, as we know, we're still feeling the ramifications of today in a multitude of ways. But he peeled back the curtain a lot in his perceptions of the WWE machine at that point. Do you feel the general perception of WWE changed after that interview for a section of fans?
I wasn't there at the time, so I don't know. It's kind of hard to speak on that.
I just mean more so when he brings up all these things in this interview about all of these, the way the machine operates, right? Because for fans, it's one of the first peeks just into the intricacies of the machine in that regard and how some talent feel disenfranchised. Do you believe that, and it kind of builds off what I was saying before, that the perception, because you're very perceptive to how people look at wrestling, do you believe that the perception of WWE changed in the years to follow after that interview?
I'm sure a lot of diehard CM Punk supporters, it obviously changed their perspective. For sure. You know, and maybe other people too, because I mean, obviously when he went and he did that interview, he was a big deal. Yeah. You know, and it was something that was pretty monumental in terms of, you know, addressing WWE and, you know, in that context.
Yeah. He does some shows. He does some movies. He does a little run in UFC. You and I actually talked about that in one of our first few episodes here on the Extreme Life of Matt Hardy. Go check that out, extremehardy.com. And he'd even do the WWE on Fox show, 2019 and 2020. Hell froze over for a hot second there.
Yeah.
And in that time, he was actually pretty critical of how WWE portrayed Jeff when Jeff was doing the whole sobriety angle with Sheamus.
Yeah. No, I remember. I mean, I was in total agreement. And that was, after Jeff had tried to, Jeff had it was the first time Jeff had went to rehab, and Jeff tried to get back and walk the straight and narrow line. And I was just like, dude, like someone who has like this long ass history of addiction. I don't know if it's always good to be poking the bear with those issues on TV, and I felt like, we're at a point where so many people are smart or understand the wrestling business. I feel like a lot of people are going to be turned off by that. So I thought that was cool that he shared those opinions, when it came to talking about how it was not the best of scenarios to utilize that party.
Well, in summer of 2021, Sean Ross Sapp reports that Punk is exploring a return to wrestling, specifically in AEW. Did you hear any rumors internally ahead of time in AEW that Punk might be coming in? We know in hindsight that this was one of the closest guarded secrets of the last few years in professional wrestling.
Yeah, there'd been some Punk buzz going on for a while, and I was pretty sure Punk wasn't going to come back until we were back in front of crowds. I don't think he was going to come back during the whole pandemic era, which was such a strange, weird era in general. But there'd been some buzz about Punk, and people weren't sure if it was going to happen 100% or not, but there was some buzz. There had been some communication going on.
Well, he returns on the second episode of Rampage. It's in Chicago. It's at the United Center. AEW sells it out just on the rumor alone. And AEW never even mentions Punk's name or anything. It's strictly just leaning into these online talks. It's dubbed as the first dance. And regardless of what you think about his AEW run, regardless of what you think about AEW, if you're one of those FIs who just don't get it, this is undoubtedly one of the most emotional and remarkable moments in wrestling history, in my opinion. What was that night like when CM Punk returned to wrestling in his hometown at a sold-out United Center?
It was an FI moment. Fucking incredible. It really was. It was a very special moment. And I'm such a fan of the way Tony Khan did this. Or if it was Punk's I did too. The way they just let the teases of the rumors that were circulating on the internet that we're in Chicago and we're at the United Center, this huge venue, and something very special is going to happen on this night. It's the second Rampage, and like it's one of those things that was like one of the worst kept secrets in wrestling. Like this is going to be CM Punk's debut, but AEW never technically advertised that, or Tony Khan never technically advertised that, which is just so amazing. And the build was so perfect and so good, and then they delivered. Tony Khan and AEW and Punk had teased for so long, like something big is going to be happening here, and online, all the rumors are going around, and then they produced, and Punk showed up, and it was such an emotional, special, magical moment when he showed up. And there's that scene of the fan, that was like, in tears. He was so excited that Punk was back. Just that's the stuff that we live for, man. That's the stuff that makes pro wrestling one of the greatest things ever, one of the greatest art forms ever. That it was such a cool moment and such a special night.
But that speaks to the attachment that those fans feel to CM Punk, does it not?
Yes, it does.
That grown men are weeping over this man just returning to something that they love so much.
I mean, but it's, dude, at the end of the day, that's where Punk belongs. I mean, Punk is an amazing pro wrestler, and I'm so glad he ended up being in pro wrestling, because that's what he excels at. He's one of the best in the world is like his catchphrase, but he's one of the best in the industry, and he is so beloved for that fact, and is truly where he belongs. And once again, I think it was very gutsy of him to have the UFC dream and try that. Whatever. He went, and it didn't necessarily work out probably how he wished it would have worked out, but I give him credit for trying to live out that dream. I think that's fucking ballsy. People would ask me like, oh my God, I see CM Punk's making the transition to UFC. Are you going to try that? And I go, no, Like, how you think you do? Terrible. I'm not trained in any of that. But the fact that he came back to pro wrestling, I think pro wrestling fans too, they were just, it warmed their hearts that he was back where he belonged in the pro wrestling scene.
You know why I think that happened though, Matt? Because everyone knew, if you knew CM Punk's story, you knew that for a long period of time, he fucking loved pro wrestling. It was everything to him. We talked about that at the beginning of this episode. He loved pro wrestling. He was such a Bret Hart mark. And he like passionately felt with Bret Hart's career. And then to see him lose his love for it, I think that hurt a lot of people. So to see him come back out and cry on television, talking about being home, I think that moved a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, yes, I can vibe with that.
So he goes on. He has this really great chase of the AW Championship. He's putting guys over left and right. He's enhancing people, elevating them. He has maybe the feud of the year with MJF.
I love the stuff him and MJF did together. Really, really good.
Yeah,
I'm a big MJF fan as well, and I thought their stuff together was tremendous.
Yeah, I thought it was genuinely the best feud of the year. It was tremendous stuff. And eventually he wins the AW World Championship from Hangman Page. Then he loses the AW World Championship to Jon Moxley after missing a few months due to injury. There's some rumors of dissension amongst the ranks. I want a very honest assessment from you, Matt Hardy. Where does CM Punk sit right now in AEW, and what is the perception like of this larger-than-life figure that we have spent the last hour and a half discussing?
Well, to begin with, I was very shocked at the outcome, as I used a lot of fucks on my Twitter. I'm a lot more open about what I'm doing. I'm not really censoring anything nowadays. But I was pretty blown away by the outcome of that match. I could see Jon Moxley winning, but I didn't figure it would be as one-sided as it was. As far as the turmoil backstage in AEW, like I really don't know. Once again, Punk is a very much to himself type dude. Obviously, he was there, and they had that match, and with the way the match was laid out and how things were structured, Punk was there to do business. So I don't know. I really couldn't speak on any of that. I mean, I can speak from my experiences. AEW's been great, and everything I've done's been good. And there's no outright like chaos and dissension backstage. I mean, whatever kind of conversations that happened between Punk and the people in the office. I mean, I'm not privy to that right now, but he came last week and he was there to do business, obviously.
And like, it's wrestling. Like, these things are going to happen in locker rooms.
Of course.
People are going to say things.
It's real life. It's human beings interacting with each other, and they're going to have differences of opinion. They're going to get upset with one another. Even going back to what I said about how Jeff resented Punk whenever he made those comments. I mean, things happen. People are human beings, and they have emotions, and they feel. So, yeah. But, I mean, at the end of the day, people love the fucking drama from behind the scenes and backstage. So a lot of times, especially to the diehard fans, that's almost more interesting to them than the actual kick-ass product they get to see right in front of their face that we're doing for them.
To your knowledge, did Jeff and CM Punk ever have a, hey, we're cool moment?
I don't know, but a very funny story. Whenever Jeff showed up at AEW, Punk was off for a couple weeks. He wasn't there. And then the first show where we saw him, Jeff and I just drove us over to the hotel we were staying at, and we start walking in, and somebody's coming out of the elevator, and they've got like a hoodie on. I go, hey, what's going on, Jeff? And Jeff's like, hey, man. And I was like, you know who that was? And he's like, oh shit, that's hey, Punk, what's up, man? And then they talked for a second.
Okay.
No, I mean, and whatever. Everything's fine.
It's all water under the bridge at this point.
I think so. I think everyone's outgrown.
Yeah.
Dumb shit.
It's crazy what happens when you get older. You put life into perspective a little bit.
I mean, you continue to as you get older, and you have less time. You continue to put stuff in perspective more and more and more.
I always say it.
You learn not to rush too.
I always say it. Don't sweat the petty things, and don't pet the sweaty things. And that's exactly a great way to live life. We got a few Ask Matt questions here, and then we'll wrap things up. Bobby says, Matt, what was the locker room like when CM Punk arrived in AEW? it didn't seem to me like he moved the needle for AEW. That's been a hot debate topic. So the viewership did not skyrocket in the way that I think a lot of people may have expected it to. But with that said,
that Rampage certainly did.
The Rampage did, yes. I mean, sustained.
Yeah.
But with that said, the pay-per-view numbers went up significantly, and the buy rates went up significantly when Punk came in. How did the locker room feel about him coming in?
I don't know. You know, Punk is a very enigmatic guy. You know, so I think people just didn't know what they were going to get. Like which Punk, which Phil are you going to get? So that's probably how a lot of people initially thought. But I mean, I think things have been okay.
Yeah. Kyle wants to know, what is your relationship like with Punk and AEW? You specifically?
Yeah, just friendly. I mean, we see each other. Hey, what's up? How you doing? Shake hands, fist bump, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
You know, if we're gonna do something together, we talk, communicate. Fine.
Yeah. Brad asks, what do you attribute the cult attraction to CM Punk to? We touched on it a little bit on this episode, but is there any one thing in particular you can attribute it to?
I mean, I think it's really easy to follow him for a little while and realize he just doesn't give a fuck what anybody thinks about him. And he's just going to do whatever he wants to do. And, you know, he is very proud of his straight edge lifestyle. And I think there are people that are just attracted to that, you know, especially that fact that he just doesn't give a fuck what people think about him.
Yeah.
And ironically, it's kind of the same thing we said about Jeff. Jeff doesn't give a fuck what people think about him.
Yep.
And I think there's a lot of people, especially in this day and age where social media and people read stuff all the time. And, you know, if you're not thick skinned, that stuff will bother you, you know, and just to see someone who just doesn't give a fuck about it, I think that's something that people gravitate towards.
Now, last Ask Matt question comes from Rick Smith. Yes, because as we all know, CM Punk has the famous Pepsi tattoo on him. Matt, if you were to get a tattoo of a major food and beverage brand, what would they be?
Interesting. If we are thinking about this soft drink route, which I'm not currently drinking soft drinks now,
but maybe a drink that throughout your life you really enjoyed and meant a lot to you. Is there anything?
Maybe Surge, because that was also my wrestling name, and that was part of the even inspiration. I thought that was cool that there was a drink named Surge as well. Maybe I would have the Surge tattoo, and then whenever it comes to food, maybe I would have some sort of spicy tuna.
I knew you were going to say spicy tuna. I knew you were going to say spicy tuna. Surge, that is a very 90s answer. I like it. That's good stuff there. Matt Hardy, what's CM Punk's legacy going to be in wrestling at the end of the day?
I mean, he was a trailblazer, especially for guys that came up in an industry with a lifestyle that wasn't absolutely accepted, you know, which wasn't utterly accepted. I think that's a big deal. And also he's just like a guy who, you know, says fuck what people think and like fuck what the basic rules and parameters are. I'm going to do it my way and I'm going to make it work. And I kind of think that's what his legacy is going to be at the end of the day.
I fully agree with you, my friend, and I really enjoyed looking through the lens of Matt Hardy on this CM Punk and Jeff Hardy feud and CM Punk on the macro scale as well. I like doing these little biographical episodes because you've got some good perspective on some of these people that maybe are a little guarded or maybe people don't know all that much about. So
right.
This was some good stuff here, and he's one of my all-time favorites. And I'm excited to see how his story plays out in AEW with the AEW World Championship.
John, make sure to let it play out.
I will let it play out. So that's in the books. Next week, WWECW. A very unique time in your career. A very unique brand in wrestling history. What can we expect with that episode, Matt?
You'll probably hear me complaining about having to drag that big ass silver title around everywhere through the airports. It's the heaviest title in existence, and yeah, I would have to take an extra bag just to carry that title around.
Wow. Okay. Good to know. We'll be hearing about that next week here on WWECW. If you enjoyed The Extreme Life of Matt Hardy this week. Well, we encourage you to do it every single week as you enjoy this podcast. You can go to wherever you get your podcast, and you can leave us how many stars, Matt Hardy?
5 star review. Yeah, we greatly appreciate it whenever people listen to our content, and especially if you legitimately enjoy it and you post your review, you give us feedback. We love that so much. And take a screenshot and post it to either my social media or John's social media, which is Matt Hardy Brand or John Alba, or to the Matt Hardy Pod. Please post those reviews. Give us those 5-star reviews, and we're going to be giving away more stuff in the future because that stuff helps us. It helps us continue to get our name out there. We are very passionate about this work we do, and we think we produce a good product week in and week out, and we want you to help us to continue to build our brand.
No doubt about that. We'll also read your reviews on air, like this one from Princess Nee. It's titled Rebby. As a woman who loved wrestling all her life, I truly love yours and John's dynamic, but my God, I love a good Rebby special guest appearance. I would love more stories of them, homeschooling, childhood, pregnancy stories of each kid. Let's call it Rebby Facts, because she's real with it. Rebby.
There you have it.
I popped on the House Hardy Twitch stream, which you can check out, and Rebby called me an FI, so go check that out. It was a lot of fun. I know that popped you big time.
Oh boy, man. There you have it.
Matt Hardy, anything else you'd like to add here this week on the Extreme Life of Matt Hardy?
No, man, this was fun. It was fun to talk about, an unorthodox topic. This is something, that is typically not my wheelhouse, because I'm not like best buddies with CM Punk, and I don't have a ton of insight, but I have been around him quite a bit and worked with him quite a bit. So it was fun to delve deep into this.
I thought you had a great perspective on his feud with Jeff, and there's definitely stuff to learn from this. So I appreciate you, my friend. Good luck this weekend with All Out Weekend and all the festivities going on in AEW. Hopefully I'll get to see you there.
Yep.
And of course, the words have been spoken. We'll see you next time right here on the Extreme Life of Matt Hardy.
Deletion! My skin's dying.